Well,
So here we are.
yeah. So, I have this idea to do a podcast, but this is the only piece I'm missing is all this mindless banter.
Great.
So I'm calling you.
Banter is it's my signature move.
So you're not able to be here because you went to a baseball game and you're having dinner with your wife.
Well, I went to a baseball game and I just got home with my parents to my house.
Right. And you were going to make dinner, right? Isn't that what I imagine?
Oh, that's a great idea. I'm going to do that right now. Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted this mindless.
I was like, what are you talking about? Oh, yeah, we have to eat today. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if this is going to actually record very well, but how was the baseball game?
It was so fun. Like, the first 4 innings took 2 hours. Every single batter had a 3-2 count. It just was like so long. But it was fun because I was hanging out with my parents.
Well, that's not supposed to happen though. They're supposed to have this pitch clock, right?
Oh, the pitch clock was running, and wow, it gave me a ton of anxiety. Can you imagine just watching like the clock is ticking down, and the pitcher's there getting ready to go, and you're just watching the clock. You're watching the pitcher, but right behind him is a timer. You're like, oh, 3, 2, 1, I'm going to cut it off in time, yay! But that's not what baseball's about. It's quite disturbing. I don't like it.
Huh. Yeah, baseball's not supposed to give you anxiety, especially spring training baseball. So,
it's whack.
The idea I had is I'm going to talk about all the tools that I use to be informed on the job, and talk about all the publications I read and all the videos that I watch, or probably not the videos, but you know, that kind of thing. Just like, here are the things, if you want to be caught up on local politics, here's the things you need to read. Easy, right? And then you can do one, and we're going to call it the tools of the trade.
Extensive, and I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, but we could talk about gadgets. We could talk about your Subi. So
we could do this as a series, right?
Yeah,
the trade podcast.
Exactly.
Cool.
Okay, then. I think I got enough. As long as you say your words.
Hey, Rob.
Andrew Bauman.
Hey, Rob.
Andrew Bauman.
So glad to be here.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me on today.
All right. See you later. Have a good time. Say hello to everyone. Bye.
I will.
Arizona is a wildly beautiful place, brimming with over 100 brewing companies. I'm Rob Fulmer, the Executive Director of the Arizona Craft Brewers Guild. I'm joined by Deputy Director Andrew Bauman. Together we cover the state, bringing you the best of what's happening at our breweries and beyond. Welcome to Arizona Beer Frontier.
Andrew Bauman, as may or may not been clear in the cold open, is finishing up a baseball game. He went with his family. He's now with his family having dinner. And I wanted to get him on so we could do that opening that we've always had. So there's that. But I wanted to do a new type of show in the eventuality that either one of us would be doing a solo show without a guest, just, you know, us here talking about what we do at the Guild. And it's kind of along the lines of tools of the trade. And I think for my piece today, because it could talk about things we read, the devices we use, software, could be our vehicles. I know Andrew wants to talk about his Subaru and how he can save money by camping out, and that enables us to be on the road a lot more and be able to afford to get around to a few more places. So I thought I would start with some of the things that keep me up to date on local politics and news, which is the backdrop for all the lobbying that we do, and to try to understand the 60 House of Representatives that represent the state, and then the 30 senators. And without sort of following each and every one of their Twitter accounts, which we'll talk about in a little bit, how do we get to understand the things that are going on in the state that may be, as pressing or more pressing than things that, we might run, although they're very important for us. So in terms of staying up on things, I've kind of broken things down into things like local news and politics, local politics in specific. Not really all that crazy about having to follow national politics. It really isn't that relevant. We do some federal lobbying, but it's very specific, and it's once a year, and it's not as intensive. And the timeline is much longer. We do things over 5 and 10 years on that timeline. And here locally, we do something at least every year. So, and at the city and county level, it might be weekly or monthly, depending on what the issue is. So anyway, there's local news and politics. There's industry. And I kind of broke out. I'm not going to talk about local sources right now, for a couple of reasons. One is, in this position as the executive director, I kind of want to have a much more full scope. I want to see over the next hill. I want to see what things are happening in the rest of the country that we may have not faced yet. Or I want to see if we addressed a problem and if it's being addressed differently or the same somewhere else. So I tend to follow more national or multiple localities for industry news, and not so much locally. And I guess this would probably be the only industry-specific news source right now. I mean, in terms of the actual industry and not individuals, personalities, brewery stories, that kind of thing. And then those are handled elsewhere. So I won't be talking about local podcasts per se. So I hope you'll join me in following along with local news. I think it's really important. And I think if you're thinking that it's all about TV news or picking up certain of the newspapers, not really. I used to be a subscriber of the Republic. I think I still have a digital edition just to pick up stories here and there. But the trend is moving away, and it's more following writers that are using aggregation or their own Substack and cooperating with each other. I think local newspapers have really sort of undervalued their labor, and for various reasons, the advertising isn't there. The digital subscription model is still kind of dicey. People still don't want to pay for news. And that's wrong. I pay for news. In particular, one of the best sources I've found right now, and I don't even know if it's $60 or $100 a year. I'm not going to talk about prices too much, but it's very affordable. Is the Arizona Agenda, and it's written by Hank Stevenson and Rachel Leingang, and a whole host of other people who come in and help out. But it is aggregated. It summarizes a lot of news stories in other publications. They have their own editorial. It's done very well. It has some humor in it. It's just worth checking out. And I know they have some free editions, so you should check it out. And when you click on a link and it says this is for subscribers only, you probably should consider subscribing. It's not a lot out of your day. And what you're going to learn is you're going to find out a lot of things, what's going on in the legislature and how they affect you. And that's really the important thing. There are, of course, other publications that kind of do that. I used to subscribe to the Arizona Capital Times, and they have a specific lobbying arm called the Yellow Sheet, but it was a little bit more expensive than I wanted to pay for. And by the way, I don't use Guild money for these. These are for my own enrichment to do a better job. And right now they're not covered by the Guild, and I don't want to be limited to what tools I use with that kind of thing. So for the time being, most of the things I'm talking about are my own subscriptions or my own expenses. Someday maybe we'll be able to to buy larger subscriptions to these things. But for now, it's just better if I can read these things, digest them, maybe pass them on to Andrew, and we can sort of compile what we know and put it in our newsletters and our communications and sprinkle in our everyday conversations. So Arizona agenda, very important. The yellow sheet. If you're looking for something free that sort of just gives you a smattering of local and national, international news, look at some sites like Axios, where you can sort of dial in the types of stories you read. But again, don't be surprised if some of those links go to, the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, and you get only so many free clicks. So there's ways around it, I know, of course, but these publications need to stay alive, or they're not going to be there anymore. And we'll sort of talk a little bit about that further on down the show here. Speaking of the show.
Good morning. It's the show here on KJZZ 91.5 in Phoenix. I'm Mark Brody.
And I'm Lauren Gilger. Coming up, Governor Hobbs has named a new nominee to run the Department of Child Safety.
And a conversation about kids and the new generative AI
The show is on KJZZ. I think it starts at 9. I usually catch it on the podcast version several hours after it's occurred, because I found more recently that I'm doing other things, but I'll listen to it in the car if I'm driving. I'll listen to it as a podcast, and sometimes I'll miss a few things. But if you listen to the first part of the show, there's usually a local news story that is relevant for policy, which is what I'm interested in to do my job. On Fridays in particular, they usually bring in two political consultants to discuss what's happening in the legislature, what's happening in the governor's office, what are the policy things going on right now. And right now, I think both sides are feeling each other out on what bills are gonna go through, with a one vote difference in both the House and the Senate, and then the Democratic Governor Hobbs having the veto. So things have passed with a narrow margin during the last 8 years, and the Republican governor usually did not veto. And now when you have the split government situation, there's, I think, 16 or 17 vetoes already. And some of them are for good reasons, according to the governor, and others are for strategic reasons, according to her opponents, or maybe it's part of a feeling each other out and getting some things out of the system. But like, one of the most important things that has to happen is the signing of the budget, because pretty much nothing happens. The legislature can't shut down, so the clock can't start ticking on when laws go into effect. That's called sine die. So it's usually, 90 days after the legislature shuts down. So if it happens as normally, like in April, like it has in the last 6 out of the last 8 years, you get your laws passed and in effect sometime in July. But lately it's been September, October, and we're already planning for next year in August. So you could have a situation, and you have a situation where we're trying to understand the impact of laws that haven't gone into effect, and so we don't know if they need to be tweaked. So that's the tension right now, and you can get a sense of that by listening to the show, especially on Friday. They recap the events of the week. They talk about different things, and they have they rotate the pundits in there. So if you don't like hearing from one of them, wait a couple of weeks and you'll get another mix. But it's very well done, and in general, the show can give you a mix of human interest stories and some business stories. So I try to pay attention to all of it, but I start with the political and local policy news, the business news, and really it's an enjoyable show. So I would say that's a good centerpiece, because if you miss the show on the radio, you can or you can stream it too. It shows up as a podcast as well. In terms of other hot media, I would say for television, I started recording the 10 o'clock news. I might start recording a different station for the 5 o'clock news, just in case there's a beer story on there. I can go back and watch it. Sometimes I see social, hey, we were on Channel 5, and I'm like, oh, well, kind of missed it. So I've been recording that. I've been trying to catch more of Arizona Horizon. That's PBS. That's Channel 8, Ted Simons, who's been doing the show for about 15 years. It's more policy focused, less, there's no car chases, there's no rain stories, there's no weather really, unless we talk about larger climate stuff. So it's more policy oriented. It comes on at 10 o'clock, just like your regular news. And occasionally, I find myself watching, I think after that they have, Cronkite, which is students doing the news. And it's always interesting to see, their take on the news and kind of rooting for them to put together this great news show as students. I don't know, seems kind of weird, but it's just an interesting way to get the news differently from younger people who are trying to get into the industry. And if you stick around long enough, you'll be watching ICT, which is Indigenous news that's more regional. So you get some stories from New Mexico, Colorado, but focused on Indigenous issues. I bet most people who are listening probably haven't ever heard a news show from that perspective. And so it's helpful to get these kinds of perspectives. Indigenous peoples generally aren't our alcohol customers, although a few are. And it is a contentious issue in some respects. So it's important for me to understand that, because some of our legislators have different feelings about that, and coming from Native American districts. So always important to sort of get that perspective. Social media, strictly for news. Facebook is not a good source for news at all. And I don't really. I think Facebook is more storytelling or interpretation of the news by your friends, and I think Twitter is more focused on news snippets and how they relate to the industry. And this is where you can get that wider scope outside of your friend group on Twitter. Yes, Twitter is a hot mess right now. That guy Elrond is kind of ruining it. There are hiccups with the site now. He seems to think he's a software engineer. He is not. I don't want to get too political in it, but here's the unexpected weird thing that's happened. I don't follow all the legislators. I don't have to, because they retweet each other. I follow some of the party accounts, like the Democratic Party of Arizona and the Republican, or maybe it just comes to me. The thing that's weird is, unfortunately, you're going to get a lot of opinions that you don't care about. So in some respects, it sort of balanced my feed out a little bit in terms of I get some stuff that really doesn't interest me, but concerns me more than interests me. Unfortunately, I get to hear a lot from legislators about things that I don't think are very important. But if you're conscientious about it, you can mute things. You can make sure that the feed itself isn't giving you high anxiety. But I think it's important to get a cross section of the people who write laws in our state. So it's very valuable. People challenge other people's opinions. So you get a pretty good barometer on, I guess, the tail ends on either side of what's going on. I think it over exaggerates the divisiveness and polarization in a lot of respects, but it's still somewhat of a valuable tool. And it allows me to get some news from other parts of the country for people who are interested in their own beer communities, more so than Facebook. And I don't know the dynamic involved. Maybe it's when you started and how you started. I know there's a lot of talk about the algorithm. I don't think there's anything nefarious about the beer algorithm per se, but the thing about Twitter is there's usually an argument about something. And so if you can sort of work through that and get to what you need out of it, you're better off. than not. So those are the local news digests. I guess I could talk about publications that we have in the office. We get Zymergy from the the American Homebrewers Association. We get the New Brewer from the Brewers Association. We get a couple grocery store trades. I just got Craft Beer and Brewing because Kate Bernot, a writer that you should follow either on Twitter or she's on Good Beer Hunting. She's had bylines for, I think the Wall Street Journal. I'm not sure, but bigger publications on just super knowledgeable about beer and the impact of mergers and acquisitions and federal regulation. And in this particular case, I think she's responsible for sending me a subscription or at least one copy of Craft Beer and Brewing magazine because she wanted some information about water, and I was able to connect her with a few people. And Kate, if you're listening, you probably need to do another article because things have changed in the last 4 or 5 months since that was written. But I think when you read her pieces, you have a better understanding of all the nuts and bolts of what's going on. So if things change, you actually sort of have an opportunity to anticipate that and find out some more information based on the way she writes. We used to get the Business Journal, although I think we have that as a subscription occasionally in the office. The Business Journal is great for leads on business opportunities, potential people that the guild can partner with. But that's local. So let's talk about industry news on the digital side, which would be newsletters and things like that. Right now we get Brewbound. It has a little bit more industry job information. That's really not the focus of what we use it for, although right now it's kind of a barometer on mergers and acquisitions and equipment that's out there for sale. And we're not obviously as a guild buying that stuff, and we're not necessarily, passing the line, but it is kind of give us a sort of another data point for understanding the challenges this industry is facing. We used to get Beer Business Daily. It's kind of a little bit more expensive. The main editor is Harry Schumacher. He spent many years on the distribution side, so it doesn't have a very distribution bent. Beer Business Daily talks about large breweries, not necessarily craft, although there is Craft Business Daily. But the most valuable piece to me is Beer Business Daily because that's what our the main drivers of this industry, the large breweries, are writing about or talking to each other about. I guess you could assume that they are adversaries, but there are a lot of things too. There are pieces of information that none of our smaller breweries, even collectively, can sort of throw out there. And the funny thing about the large breweries and the large distributors is they'll tell you what their business plan is. And it's like they're almost daring you to say, well, even though you know all this, there's not very much you can do about it. I stopped subscribing just because this was coming out of my pocket, and it's pretty spendy. I've been to the conference a few times. It can be valuable for connecting with people and to show that where we are from, we're interested in being part of the national conversation about what's going on in the beer industry. So I may have to pick that up next year if things pick up for this organization. It'd be nice to reconnect with some of the people that I met there. Some people here from Arizona. I've seen business owners from here, former business owners, like someone like Kimberly Clements, who has a consulting business here in Tucson called Pints. So always good for connections. If you're interested in the kind of thing that they talk about, they have a YouTube channel that I occasionally listen to. We throw it up on the screen here in the office. Harry Schumacher, like I said, he spent a lot of time in the distribution side and can get a lot of inside information. Although he's younger than me and he seems like he's 68 years old sometimes. Harry, if you're listening, probably not, loosen up a little bit, man. You're not that old. I know you've had kids and stuff, but don't make yourself older than you need to be. Another publication, this one I subscribe to, is called Fingers. It's written by Dave Infante. There are two Infantes we'll be talking about, Dave Infante and Jessica Infante. They're not related. So Dave Infante writes for a couple of publications. VinePair is where maybe you might have seen his byline. But he has a newsletter called Fingers, and he talks about labor issues more. He talks about the challenge that is coming from non-alcohol soft drink beverages. He's the one that turned us on to the concept of dairy alcohol. He is very much on top of the beat, talking of taking our childhood sugary beverages and adding alcohol to them. And he's done an extensive bunch of reporting on the Beast and what do you call it? Mountain Dew? Alcoholic Mountain Dew? I can't remember what it is anymore. It's non-alcoholic Mountain Dew is Mountain Dew. Does it have another name? Is it just alcoholic Mountain Dew? I don't know. I don't remember. So he writes about those kinds of things and quirky stuff. Does a beer gifts for people you don't like. That's the kind of humorous angle he's taking. He's dissected commercials from the 80s when in the first round of these ready-to-drink cocktail-like things were occurring. Bringing the fun back to it a little bit. And Jessica Infante, I believe she used to work for Boston Beer, and she's very well versed and seasoned, maybe not necessarily as a reporter, but it seems like she's been doing this job a lot longer, I guess only a couple of years. She writes for Brewbound, and when her and Dave Infante and Kate Bernot get together on any kind of broadcast, it's always fun. They do podcasts together once in a while. They used to do that Twitter, whatever that Twitter hangout thing was. Super informative. So those are digital reads, but as you can tell, as we get into some of these, you can follow along in various ways. So podcasts, and again, I won't be talking about local podcasts. That could be its own thing. I mentioned Brewbound is a readable thing. Brewbound also does conferences, as does Beer Business Daily that I talked about. I haven't been to an official Brewbound yet. I've been to some of their side events where they do that at GABF or CBC. They'll do a panel or couple panels. If you recall, when I was in Colorado for GABF, my colleague Shawnee Adelson spoke at Brewbound for GABF. That's an excellent podcast talking about news that drives policy, that talks about sales and trends. Another great podcast with a lot of different facets is Good Beer Hunting, and you'll find people like Brian Roth who talks and writes about the business numbers behind decision making and chain grocery stores, and are RTDs going to destroy the world, or are they softening? Definitely understood the velocity of seltzer before everyone else, and also showed signs that it was flattening out. So super knowledgeable, very well spoken, paces his podcast super well, does research on all his guests. I'm just in the middle of listening to him talk to Julia Herz, the executive director now of the American Homebrewers Association. Can't say enough about him. They also do a lot of writing into labor, more so on equity and inclusion issues, and more of the cultural trends in craft beer. Although I don't read it on the regular. I usually pick and choose through some of the people writing. As you can understand, I'm telling you about a lot of things I do almost every day, and I'm already 30 minutes into this podcast just describing them. A lot of this is a function of time, and so I have the benefit of being able to read when I can read, or listen when I'm in the car, or when we're in the office, we can sort of turn it on, or getting ready in the morning, checking on emails. You can usually have two things going on at once, although you have to go, wait, what did I hear right then? And you can rewind and get caught up. I should also mention all of the All About Beer podcasts that John Hall does. Don Say, M. Souter, Augie Carton. There's 4 or 5 under the All About Beer moniker. Steal This Beer, Drink Beer. There's a number of those that you'd probably be interested in. And again, these are, although they talk to local people of various places, it's really more about understanding what the trends are and not getting specific information about a brewery. I mean, although they're giving that out, it's not really what I listen for. I already mentioned Beer Business Daily. I think I'm going to leave it at that. I might do a whole other show on how to use the Arizona Legislature's website and the video and how to log into the Request to Speak system, how to be able to make your opinions heard directly before votes, things like that. Tomorrow, well, today is Tuesday, Wednesday, the 8th. So I'm not sure if this is going to get out tomorrow or Thursday or Friday, but on the 8th is International Women's Day. So I'm going to show up for a brew out at 7 o'clock at 7 a.m. at Greenwood Brewing Company, and maybe get to later in the day to 100 Mile, I guess, is doing one as well. But Jeremy DeConcini from Moto Sonora Brewing Company is going to be here. He is a newly minted board member. And he, if you recognize the name, I'm not going to get into it. Maybe he'll talk about it. We're going to try to get some, we're trying to get him on I was going to say on tape, but that doesn't exist anymore. We're going to try to get some recording of him to talk about himself and so on. But he is assisting in our lobbying efforts. He's coming up for the day. Our consensus bill 2223, which gives us a couple of cool things this year if it passes. He's coming up for the Senate Commerce hearing. Right now, we're halfway through. We had a unanimous yes vote in the House. In the Senate, we are waiting to get through Commerce, and hopefully things will be on track for us to get a sufficient amount of votes to transmit this to the governor and make it law. In that package, among other things, and this is consensus among 80 different stakeholders, so no small feat. It has been run by Steve Barkley, who represents the the Beer and Wine Distributors of Arizona. Steve Barkley has worked with us on a number of things. Anyway, it will allow breweries to secure permits to be able to sell beer in locations such as, but not exclusively, and not up to them all the time. Farmers markets may be like, hey, we're pretty good now. We got enough going on here. Or maybe maybe the fees are such that they're not worthwhile. But we have the opportunity to sell beer directly to the public in the same manner as wineries and distilleries in these sort of ad hoc festivals. It's called a festival license, although it's not the kind of festival that we do, i.e. strong beer or Baja Beer Fest coming up very soon. Tickets on sale. Got to make that happen. That is a key piece in getting us through the rest of the year to do these kinds of things. Anyway, he's coming up tomorrow. We're going to talk strategy. Maybe we'll get some quotes out of him. Maybe we'll get him to sit down for a couple minutes to talk about his brewery, his philosophy, and all that. So, failing that, or if that's a small piece of what we talk about, maybe we'll talk about RTS and the legislative website and how to use the videos and how to strategically find out when your voice most matters and what you need to do to do that. Because if we ever come across a bill where we need your help, we're going to ask you to log into RTS and make your voice heard. So a lot of information there. Hopefully you find some of it useful, and look for more of these kinds of specialty shows with one or both of us. I think if Andrews has to do a solo show, I'm pretty sure he's going to talk about how he travels maybe in his Subaru and how he has that all tricked out for camping. He's a big camping enthusiast. That could be a show he does. Man, I think if we just went through our vehicles and talked about the specific things that are in the car sometimes at all times and sometimes just for festivals might surprise you. Like to talk about our podcasting equipment sometime, or, the computers that we use in the office, the services we use, all that. That will be tools of the trade as part of Arizona Beer Frontier. So, it's hard to close the show all by yourself. It's easy to talk all in the middle of it, hard to start it too. Anyway, cheers to you guys. I didn't even drink a beer. I'm going to have to fix that. So, cheers.